All right, so I came across a pretty cool little item recently, which is going to lead to some pretty interesting conversations. So this guy, Benjamin Edgar, is a designer who I believe is from Chicago. If not, he is based in Chicago. And here he has this new item, which I came across on someone's Instagram story, which he says is called a single cigarette after dinner. So this is basically it's a holder. I think it probably helps it not become stale, but it's some sort of, it's a little, what do you call this? Kind of a wallet for a cigarette. It's sort of a cigarette, there's probably a specific word for it, but a cigarette holder, a cigarette, what would you call this? Cigarette carrying case, maybe. So here's a couple pics. I like this pic, a single cigarette. You kind of see it in action. So he says, a single cigarette after dinner company, the most succinct explanation of myself/company in a single object, to be enjoyed functionally or simply as a sentiment in physical form, perhaps both. One part sculpture, one part logo of a way of thinking about product design, one part product. Okay, so 3 parts. Sculpture, logo of thinking about product design, and 1 part product. Milled from 316 surgical stainless steel, 316 surgical stainless steel with a knurled and threaded cap. I've never seen that word in my life, knurled. Available now, $100. So yeah, it had a pretty strong reception. You've got some interesting people here. John Buscemi. He was like, this looks cool. Yeah, so in the United States media sphere, it had a pretty strong reaction. I saw lots of people, this is super chic, I would love to get my hands on it. Stylists, journalists, menswear designers, everyone was kind of like, this is cool, I want this. So it had a pretty strong reaction, which is cool to see. And what's interesting is I have a couple caveats with the product itself, but we'll get to that in a second. Let me tell you about Benjamin Edgar. I've spoken with this guy. Really, really nice guy, really sincere guy, which you love to see, really down to earth. So I was, as many of you may relate, I was sort of, when did I email him? I emailed this guy a couple months after graduation. I was sort of lost, not really sure what to do, want to create a name for myself and sort of, the creative industries, right? And I was like, I don't really know what to do, and I liked his work, and I emailed him, and I was like, hey, I basically asked him for career advice, essentially. Do you have time to chat? I would love to kind of pick your brain. And he got back to me, and he says, hey, Lachlan, thanks for the notes and the kind words. I'll likely stick to email, as I'm not the biggest fan of phone calls. The advice I want to offer the advice I tend to offer is, find your voice. This is the critical part. If you simply want clients and want to solve their problems with existing approaches, learn as many technical skills as possible and apply them. Most clients want an individual voice. And he kind of goes into his other little advice. Yeah, he says, I hope this helps. My advice to everyone, especially those who are young, take a lot of risks. So, pretty amazing advice. I reposted this, I copied and pasted this and spoke about it on my next IG post about my birthday. I'm turning 23, and this is kind of how I'm feeling optimistic. I got really good advice. I reached out to this guy, and he says, above all, find your voice, which I think is really cool. And I reflected on what this guy's advice was and decided, I've got this sort of mi habilidad de hablar español, mis intereses en el francés, j'aimerais bien maîtriser le français un jour. Je suis assez résolu à maîtriser le français. So yeah, I think the linguistic side is really important to me. That's also key to my voice, more so than I think up until a couple months ago, when this guy kind of inspired me to, get my Substack, get my little articles and journals out. I've got, 50 subscribers to my Substack, and, you wouldn't think, right? I'm just some random 24, 23 at the time, 24-year-old guy. Who cares what I have to say? I kind of put these articles out, and, people found it interesting, right? I'm talking about different, African culture and tech and this kind of stuff. And people are like, oh, not bad. So yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It really is cool. And I'm always encouraging, my peers to, hey man, I think you have an interesting take on. I think you would have an interesting take on this or that. Actually, one of the journaling exercises I've done over and over is reflecting on who are the most interesting people I know. Who are the most interesting people I know who I think have really interesting perspectives and who I wish, would post more articles or have their own blog or make their own videos or kind of speak more about their views on the world. So yeah, it's been really positive, and I think in the past year or two, I've done a good job. I've done a pretty good job about here's my take on this or that, and that's a big part of the show. I want to help educate you, and maybe you can pick up improve your linguistic skills, and help you. My French isn't great, but I can give you exposure to different French articles and podcasts, which is what we're going to do tonight. So yeah, I thought that was quite cool. So a couple caveats on the product, and then we will get into kind of cigarette culture, which should be a fun little chat. So a couple caveats on the product. Sorry, I've messed this up. Overall, I do really like it. I think it's a really, really cool idea, and I think the reception speaks to that. I think it's really cool. Above all, I liked it. It's really intentional, and what I mean by that is I've been pretty impressed. One of the cool nuances, minutia of Spanish culture. And I think this also exists in lots of Spanish-speaking cultures. When I was in Mexico, hay esta cultura de beber zumos frescos. Y en Estados Unidos no hay una cultura tan fuerte. En España es impresionante como yo estuve con mi familia gallega, con quienes viví cuando estudié en España, cuando tenía 15 años. Era un estudiante extranjero para hacer un año de intercambio. Y luego estuve con mi familia gallega, y un día estuvimos en Ribeira, en la costa gallega, y estuvimos en su piso para pasar un fin de semana en el piso, en la playa. Y bueno, fuimos de compras, y creo que mi madre compró un bolso de naranjas para el día siguiente, la mañana siguiente, para hacer zumo, para poder beber un zumo de naranja. So I like that it's really intentional. You specifically, it's almost like if you can picture, going to the store specifically to get a bag of oranges because you know that the next day you want to have a glass of orange juice, or even just buying one orange. I don't know, maybe you only have a euro on you or something. Buying one orange, and the next day you make your little juice and sit down and read the paper. It's really intentional, and it's really romantic. It's really cool. So I like that about it. Obviously, it's it's good to, in moderation, right? Instead of having it is quite elegant, isn't it? Instead of bringing out a big old pack of cigarettes, you got just the one after a nice meal. Maybe it's a weekly thing, even a monthly thing. When I'm out on vacation, or I'm going to Milan this weekend, and I'm going to bring this, and I'm going to have my little cigarettes after dinner. So I like that a lot. One thing, and this might just be part of his sort of branding and logo, it's not. It is somewhat overt branding, isn't it? It's a bit too explicit for my liking. I would appreciate. I think the way I'm thinking about it is that it almost I can picture that there's probably somewhere in Japan, right? There's probably some craftsman who has been making cigarettes or tobacco carrying cases for centuries, and you would imagine it's probably the only signifier of who made it is probably on the bottom or the side, some little insignia or chiseling or something really, really implicit and really subtle. So this is it's a bit loud. It's a bit loud in that sense, but I appreciate that it still looks cool. You have this nice Helvetica typography, but it's a bit loud in that sense. I think it'd be cooler if it was just very generic, very subtle. Maybe on the bottom you had this sort of insignia. That's my only critique. But besides that, I think it's really cool. I think it is really cool. And if I had $100 laying around, I might get it. It's cool. I think one of the reasons that this product really resonated is that since I've moved to Europe, I've been here for about 5 or 6 months, and I hope to stay. Since I've moved to Europe, the cigarette culture is pretty prominent. It's more so than, I suppose, if you're in a handful of big cities in the U.S., but I feel like the U.S. has pretty much, it's done lots of aggressive marketing and government regulations against cigarettes. There still seems to be a pretty prominent, it's actually super prominent, what am I saying? All the young people, all the hotties, man, all the hotties who are 25 years old, Madrid, Paris, London, they're all smoking cigs. It's a super, super prominent culture. It's super embedded in the culture. So this is actually pretty funny because I think, like you, my upbringing, my mom from the moment I was 13 or 14, right, to the moment I was to this day, practically, about like 18, 20. She basically told me every single day, right? Don't smoke, don't drink, don't have sex, right? Don't do anything fun, basically. So, I felt like I was sort of a late bloomer in the social sense, didn't drink until basically university, didn't smoke till a lot later, didn't have sex until after a lot of my friends. All this is fine. Ultimately, everyone has their own sort of timeline for this stuff, but it was that was kind of my upbringing. I was sort of horrified and disgusted by drinking and smoking and all this stuff. I remember when I got to Spain, it's actually one of the most profound experiences of my life. It really is. It's one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. This one experience I had while I was in Spain. So I get to Spain llegué con 15 años. Con 15 años llegué a Galicia, ¿vale? Y luego entre mi instituto y otro instituto, no sé por qué, pero la palabra instituto me sale muy raro, me sale muy italiano, muy portugués, instituto. No es difícil decir, pero para alguna razón me sale muy raro. Bueno, instituto en Galicia y otro instituto en Francia, en el noroeste de Francia, estuvieron de acuerdo, había un programa de intercambio entre el instituto en Galicia y el instituto en Francia. Es decir, cada año un grupo de franceses iban a Galicia para quedarse con estudiantes, con estudiantes en Galicia, y luego, después de unos meses, los españoles iban a Francia para quedarse en la casa de su pareja, the person that they were paired up with, their little foreign exchange student partnership. So what was cool is, yo quedándome en la casa de mi familia gallega, yo acogimos a este francés, un francés que se llamaba Guillem. Guillem y sus colegas, su clase, vino a Montfort de Lemos, donde estudié ese año, vino a visitarnos. Y bueno, Guillem, que se queda en la casa donde vivía yo, en nuestra casa, en mi casa, en Galicia, y fue rarísimo, ¿sabes? Yo siendo inglés estadounidense, viviendo en una casa en España y luego acogiendo a un francés. Fue súper cosmopolito. Entonces, cuando fuimos a Francia, jamás lo voy a olvidar. Cuando llegamos a Francia, Guillem y sus amigos vinieron a Galicia en noviembre, y luego nuestra clase española, o sea, nuestra clase en Galicia, nosotros todos fuimos a verlos en abril. Y luego cogimos un bus de Montfort de Lemos a Francia, ¿sabes? 24 horas. Y llegamos y me quedé con Guillem. Y lo pasamos súper bien, lo pasamos muy bien. Y su familia muy cariñosa, muy simpática. Su madre me hizo... his mother made me crepes. She made me, authentic handmade crepes. It was delicious. Really, really cool. Quedándome en casa, saber qué tal, y hablando un poco en francés. Y ¿qué más? Me asombró que en Francia, todo el mundo en este momento tenía 15 años, 14, 15, 16, y todas las francesas fumaban. 14 años, 15 años, 16 años, todas, la mayoría fumaban. Unas francesas súper monas, súper bonitas, muy guapas, y todas fumaban, todas, con 15 años, justo antes de ir a clases, justo antes de ir a matemáticas, a historia, a aprender cosas, todo el mundo fumando, no lo puedo creer. Y en ese momento me dio un asco, me pareció, esto no está bien, era muy pringado, ¿sabes? No fumaba, no bebía, no hacía nada. Entonces, en ese momento me dio un asco, pero hoy en día, ¿sabes? Hoy en día he tenido, de hecho, cuando llegué a Madrid, aterricé en Madrid. Llevo 5 meses en España y aterricé en Madrid. Y me quedé con mi familia, con mi hermana Carolina, mi hermana española. Y tuvimos copas en casa, en un piso de su amiga. Y hubo un momento súper poético, súper romántico, todo el mundo con las ventanas abiertas y una una lluvia súper fuerte y unos árboles verdes y el olor y todo el mundo liándose cigarros por la ventana. Y eso me parece muy guay, porque en Estados Unidos no hay esa cultura de liarse un cigarro. Todo el mundo compra cigarros, paquetes de cigarros en la tienda. Y me parece muy guay este como tactical. What's the word I'm looking for? Tactical, tactile, tactical, strategic, táctil. Sí, ok, cool, new word. Todo el mundo, ¿cómo se dice eso? Todo el mundo haciendo brindis, o sea, salud, todo el mundo fumando, bebiendo, era un momento muy súper bonito. Así que hoy en día el cigarro me gusta y unless my mother is watching, cigarettes are seriously disgusting. And I would never put that poison in my body. No, seriously. Mom, don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about me. All right.